You won't believe what happened inside this quiet little bank on a sunny Monday morning. It started like any ordinary day. The glass doors slid open, letting in the soft warmth of the morning sun. The air smelled of fresh paper and coffee, the usual quiet buzz of customers filling forms and waiting patiently in line. The bank staff moved about with routine energy, some typing, some talking, some nodding politely at customers. Everything seemed normal, predictable. And then, she walked in. She wasn't dressed like the others. No designer handbag, no expensive jewelry, no branded sunglasses. Instead, she wore old, faded jeans, the kind that had clearly been washed, one too many times. Her simple t-shirt was wrinkled and loose. On her feet were scuffed sneakers that had seen better days, the soles slightly worn, the laces uneven. To anyone watching, she looked like just another tired, struggling woman trying to sort out her personal finances, maybe paying off a bill, maybe opening a simple savings account to make ends meet. There was nothing about her that suggested wealth or status or importance. And that's where the mistake began. Behind the main counter stood Sandra, the head teller that day. Sandra was known among her colleagues for her sharp tongue and judgmental eye. She believed she could tell a customer's worth just by looking at them. Expensive watch, VIP service, poor clothes, waste of time. And as soon as Sandra spotted this woman walking towards her desk, she rolled her eyes. "Another one," Sandra muttered under her breath. The woman approached the counter with a gentle smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'd like to inquire about opening a business account, please." Sandra barely lifted her eyes. She was busy tapping on her phone under the desk, scrolling through social media while pretending to check some files. "Business account," Sandra scoffed loudly. "Are you serious?" The woman's smile faltered for just a moment. "Yes, I'm starting a small business. I wanted to see what options you offer." Sandra let out a mocking laugh. A few customers nearby glanced over, curious at the rising tone. "You starting a business?" Sandra repeated, smirking. "Lady, you look like you can't even afford breakfast. What kind of business do you think you're going to run dressed like that? A lemonade stand?" The woman didn't flinch. She stood calmly, her hands resting gently on the counter. "Actually, I have some plans I'd like to discuss. Is there a brochure I can take? Or maybe speak to a manager?" Sandra shook her head dramatically, as if the very idea was ridiculous. "Listen, people like you don't qualify for our premium business services. We cater to real business owners. You should try the bank down the street. They've got basic checking accounts for people like you." Her words were like sharp daggers, loud enough for others in the bank to hear. Some customers raised their eyebrows. A mother waiting with her child shook her head disapprovingly. An elderly man quietly muttered, "How rude," under his breath. But Sandra didn't care. She had made up her mind about this woman. Old jeans, cheap shoes, no name brand anything. To her, this wasn't someone worth wasting time on. But here's the twist Sandra didn't see coming. The woman standing quietly at the counter was no ordinary customer. Her name was Laura Bennett, CEO and founder of Bennett Financial Group, the woman who personally owned this entire chain of banks, the one who signed the checks for every employee, including Sandra herself. And here she stood, wearing plain clothes on purpose. She wasn't just here by chance. No, Laura had decided to visit random branches secretly, dressed like a regular customer, to see how everyday people were treated when the staff thought no one important was watching. And Sandra had just made the worst mistake of her career. But Laura said nothing. She didn't correct Sandra. She didn't reveal her identity. Instead, she kept her gentle smile and continued softly, "Are you sure there's no one else I can speak to? Maybe someone in management?" Sandra rolled her eyes again and pointed lazily toward the door. "Like I said, try your luck at another bank. We're not wasting time setting up a real business account for someone who probably can't even make the minimum deposit." The insult cut through the air like a blade. But Laura didn't break. Years of running businesses, surviving failures, building empires from scratch. She had heard worse. But this was disappointing. Because it wasn't about the insult to her. It was about every other struggling customer who might walk into this bank and get treated the same way. And that made Laura's next decision clear. Because what Sandra didn't realize was that this ordinary-looking woman held the power to decide her future. And that decision was coming fast. The quiet bank was about to witness a moment no one there would ever forget. The woman stepped softly toward the counter, her simple sneakers making the faintest sound against the polished floor. She carried no briefcase, no leather portfolio, no expensive designer bag. Just a quiet confidence in her eyes and a calm smile on her face. "Good morning," she said warmly, her voice gentle but clear. "I'd like to make an inquiry about opening a new business account, please." Behind the counter sat Sandra, the senior bank teller for this branch. Sandra had been in this job for nearly 10 years, and somewhere along the way, she had lost her patience. Maybe she'd dealt with too many grumpy customers. Maybe the stress of life had worn her down. But one thing was for sure. Sandra had developed a dangerous habit, judging people by their appearance. Without even looking properly at the woman, Sandra sighed loudly, smacked her gum, and glanced quickly up from her phone, which she was hiding just under the desk. A smirk curled on her lips. "A business account?" she said, her voice thick with sarcasm. "Seriously, you want to open a business account?" The woman nodded politely. "Yes, I do. I'm planning to start something new, and I wanted to know the account options your bank offers." Sandra let out a short, nasty laugh. "You?" she sneered, scanning the woman's wrinkled t-shirt, old jeans, and well-worn sneakers. "Lady, do you even have enough money to start a business? You look like you can't even afford a coffee from here, let alone run a company." The room fell instantly silent. A man filling out forms nearby stopped writing. A young mother waiting in line turned her head, shocked. A teenage boy glanced up from his phone, eyebrows raised. The customers were watching, listening, but the woman didn't flinch. Her smile remained steady, her eyes calm. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm starting a business, but I wanted to learn about your options before making a decision. You see, I believe every business, big or small, deserves the right financial tools to succeed." Sandra snorted, rolling her eyes dramatically for everyone to see. "Honey," she said in a slow, mocking tone, "we offer premium business accounts here, not for people like, well, you." The word hung in the air like a bad smell. "Maybe you should try the little credit union down the street," Sandra continued, her voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "They have simple checking. Accounts, no fees, no fuss. Probably more your style, you know, basic, like your outfit." A soft gasp rippled through the room. One elderly man shook his head disapprovingly. Another woman whispered to her friend, "Did you hear that? How rude." But Sandra ignored them all. In her mind, this was just another waste of time. Another nobody, wasting her workday. But the woman, she still didn't break. Not even a blink of anger. No harsh reply. She simply tilted her head slightly, her smile never fading. "I see," she said gently. "But I thought banks were supposed to help people start businesses. Isn't that the point of financial services? To lift people up, not push them away because they don't look like they've made it yet?" Her words were simple, soft, but they carried weight. For the first time, Sandra paused. Something about the woman's tone, calm, sure of herself, unshaken, made her uneasy. But pride, oh pride, kept Sandra's mouth moving. "Listen," Sandra huffed, waving a hand as if brushing the woman aside. "We don't have time for dreams and maybe plans. Real business clients come in here every day with real money, real investments, people in suits, people with gold. Cards, not this." She waved her fingers toward the woman's clothes like they were trash. The bank had gone completely quiet now. A manager poked his head from the office at the back, curious about the sudden hush in the lobby. Customers pretended to read their papers, but they were secretly watching this unfold, holding their breath, and still, the woman stood there, still calm, still patient, still smiling. Her eyes met Sandra's. "I understand," the woman said kindly. "But perhaps you should remember something important. Every successful business owner started somewhere, some in suits, but most in clothes like mine. Dreams don't wear labels, you know." Sandra flushed slightly but covered it with a loud laugh. "Save the speeches, lady. Like I said, this is for serious clients only, not for someone who looks like they just walked in off the street." More stares, more whispers. But this time, a shift in the room. A few customers began frowning at Sandra. One mother shook her head at the poor service. A young man whispered, "That's messed up." Under his breath, the atmosphere had changed, but Sandra was too busy being rude to notice. "Champagne." Woman didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I appreciate your time," she said softly. "And I'll make sure to mention your advice to the management." Sandra laughed again. "Sure. Tell the manager. He'll say the same thing. We don't do business with charity cases." But oh, how wrong she was, because in just a few moments she'd learn the truth and her career would never be the same. What Sandra didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was the shocking truth about the woman standing quietly before her. This wasn't just any customer. Her name was Laura Bennett. Yes, that Laura Bennett, the self-made millionaire, the visionary CEO, the brilliant founder of Bennett Financial Group, the corporation that had recently acquired this entire chain of banks in a massive multi-million-dollar deal just 3 months ago. She wasn't there by accident. No random visit, no mere curiosity. Laura had deliberately dressed down that morning. Old jeans, wrinkled t-shirt, worn sneakers, not because she couldn't afford designer clothes, but because she chose to look like an ordinary customer. She had made a promise to herself when she took over this banking empire. "I want to know how my people treat those who seem powerless. I want to see their true colors. Not when they think the boss is watching, but when they believe no one important is around." And today, that promise was being tested. Sandra was failing that test spectacularly. Laura stood there, unshaken, as Sandra's insults sliced the air, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. Customers watched nervously, some whispering under their breath. The old man in the waiting chairs clenched his cane tighter, scowling at Sandra's rudeness. A young mother frowned, whispering to her daughter, "That poor lady." A businessman by the door pulled out his phone, recording discreetly. Who knew? This could go viral. But Laura kept her gentle smile. "Could I at least have a brochure?" she asked politely, her voice as calm as ever. "Or maybe speak to a manager. If that's possible." Sandra sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes like a teenager scolding someone who'd asked a stupid question. "Ugh! People like you waste our time," she snapped, her gum popping loudly. "No manager is free to meet with walk-ins who probably can't even keep a savings account open, let alone start a business." Laura remained silent. "We don't have brochures for low-level accounts," Sandra added, her voice thick with mockery. "Besides, everything you need is on the website. Maybe you should learn how to use the internet first before dreaming about running a business." It was a cruel, careless jab, but Sandra wasn't done humiliating her. She flipped her long, fake nails against the keyboard lazily, and said just loud enough for the nearest customers to hear. Honestly, some people just don't know their place, wasting my time when real clients are waiting. Then, as if the woman in front of her no longer existed, Sandra turned away, back to her hidden phone, grinning as she began scrolling through her feed again, checking messages, liking posts. But this time, the room felt different. A quiet tension filled the air. The customers noticed. Their disapproving looks grew stronger. Murmurs spread. A man in a suit muttered, "She's going to get fired for this," under his breath. And yet, Laura said nothing. Not yet. Inside her mind, memories stirred. Memories of when she, too, had stood in banks like this, asking for small business loans to start her dream company. Back then, she had worn similar clothes, simple, cheap, practical. No one had given her respect. No one had believed in her. She knew exactly what it felt like to be dismissed, to be judged. And that was why she was here today. To make sure that no other dreamer, no future entrepreneur, inventor, or hard worker would ever have to feel like this in her bank. Because this bank, this entire network, it belonged to her. And this rude teller, this careless employee, was about to find that out the hard way, but not just yet. Laura adjusted her notebook in her hand, glancing around the room. The customers met her gaze. Some nodded at her as if silently apologizing for Sandra's behavior. They could tell something unusual was happening. But Sandra... She was too absorbed in her phone to notice the storm about to hit her career. Laura could have ended this right now. She could have snapped her fingers and revealed who she was. Could have called for the manager on the spot. Could have fired Sandra in front of everyone. But that wasn't her way. She wanted the lesson to be complete. She wanted this moment to reveal the truth, not just to Sandra, but to the entire branch. Because customer service, real service, was about respect. And respect should never depend on clothes, money, or appearance. Taking a deep breath, Laura turned toward the office door at the back of the lobby. It was time for the manager to step in. But Sandra was still in her own world, laughing at her. Private messages, clueless, completely unaware that the woman she had just insulted wasn't some broke dreamer with empty pockets. She was the CEO, the owner, the woman who decided salaries, promotions, and dismissals, and in just a few moments, Sandra's entire reality was about to crash down. The quiet bank lobby was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. But Laura remained. Calm, because true power doesn't need to raise its voice. It waits, watches, and strikes at the perfect moment. Just then, at the very moment Sandra flipped back to her phone, smirking, feeling proud of the way she had put that woman in her place, the office door at the far end of the bank swung open. Out stepped Mr. Clark, the branch manager. He was adjusting his tie, a file in his hand, walking briskly toward the lobby to check on the quietness he had noticed through the glass. But as his eyes scanned the room and landed on the woman standing at the counter, his stride suddenly froze, his face turned pale, his mouth opened slightly in shock. Ms. Bennett," he stammered. His voice cracked slightly with nervous surprise. I wasn't told you'd be visiting this branch today." The file in his hand slipped from his fingers, falling quietly onto the polished floor. A hush fell over the bank. Every head turned toward Mr. Clark. Every customer stopped pretending to be busy. And Sandra, confused and annoyed by the sudden attention, snapped her gum and rolled her eyes. "Wait, you know this lady?" she asked sarcastically. Mr. Clark slowly turned to face her. His throat tightened. His hands began to shake. "Sandra, do you have any idea who this is?" he whispered, almost in fear. Sandra blinked, confused. "Some random customer wasting time? Asking about accounts she can't afford?" she replied with a shrug. The manager's face twisted with horror. No, Sandra. This is Laura Bennett, the CEO of the entire bank network, the woman who owns this bank, our boss, the one who signs our paychecks. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. You could have heard a pin drop in that moment. A gasp escaped from the young mother by the chairs. The businessman near the door lowered his phone, wide-eyed. Even the old man with the cane sat up straighter, whispering, "I knew it. I knew something was off." But none of these reactions compared to Sandra's. Her face turned white as paper. The fake confidence drained from her expression instantly. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her chewing gum fell silently from her lips and stuck to the floor. Her eyes darted from Mr. Clark to Laura, then back again, as if trying to wake up from a bad dream, but this was no dream. Laura Bennett smiled kindly, a calm, quiet smile. The smile of a woman who held the power to change everything in this room with a single word. "Thank you, Mr. Clark," Laura said gently, her voice smooth like silk, but cutting like steel. "I decided to visit this branch unannounced today. You see, I wanted to see how regular customers are treated when no one thinks the boss is watching." She turned to face Sandra fully now. "And thanks to you, Sandra, I've seen exactly what I needed to see." The weight of those words made Sandra's knees tremble. "Ms. Bennett, please, I didn't know," she stammered, her voice now panicked and small. "I thought you were just what?" Laura interrupted, tilting her head gently. Her tone was soft, but every word carried power. "A regular person? Someone who deserves less respect? Less patience? Less dignity because she didn't walk in here wearing designer clothes or carrying a gold credit card?" Sandra stood frozen, unable to answer. "Is that how you decide who matters here?" Laura continued, her calm voice filling the entire bank. "By their clothes, their shoes, the size of their purse, their appearance?" The questions hung heavy in the air. Customers shifted uncomfortably. Even the security guard at the door looked away, embarrassed. Sandra tried to speak, her mouth opening then closing again, but no words formed. She swallowed hard. Sweat gathered on her brow. Her confidence, her arrogance, her superiority, all gone, stripped away in front of everyone. Laura sighed softly and shook her head. "I built my company from nothing, Sandra," she said gently. "I wore jeans like these when I signed my first loan papers. I wore shirts like this when I pitched my ideas to investors. Back then, no one thought I was worth their time either." Her eyes softened for just a moment. "I came here today to see if my banks had learned the lesson I had to learn the hard way. That every person who walks through those doors deserves respect, whether they look rich or not." Sandra's lip trembled. "Please, Ms. Bennett, I swear, if I had known. I didn't think." Laura held up a hand, stopping her. "And that's the problem, Sandra," she said. "You didn't think. You assumed. You judged someone's entire worth in 5 seconds based on their appearance. You didn't see a person, you saw clothing. And because of that, you've shown me that this bank, my bank, has a problem that needs to be fixed, starting with you." Sandra's shoulders slumped. Her legs felt weak. Her future flashed before her eyes. She knew, deep inside, this was the end. But Laura wasn't finished yet. She turned to Mr. Clark. "Prepare the proper paperwork. Sandra's employment here ends today." A gasp rippled through the lobby. Sandra clutched the desk to steady herself. "And Mr. Clark, tomorrow morning I want every employee in this branch in the conference room. We are going to retrain every single one of them about how to treat customers with respect, without judgment, without assumptions. No one, and I mean no one, is ever to be treated the way Sandra treated me today." "Understood, Ms. Bennett," Mr. Clark said quietly, bowing his head. Laura glanced around at the watching customers. "For anyone here who felt uncomfortable because of what you heard today, I apologize. You deserve better from my bank. And starting tomorrow, you'll get it. A quiet cheer broke the silence, a little applause, smiles, relief. But for Sandra, there was no escape from this lesson and no undoing what had just happened. Laura Bennett took a slow, steady breath. The entire bank had fallen into a deep, expectant silence. Every pair of eyes was fixed on her, some filled with curiosity, some with concern, and a few with admiration. Even the security guard at the door leaned slightly forward, holding his breath. Sandra stood frozen behind the counter, her face pale, her hands trembling, knowing that the ground beneath her career was crumbling fast. Laura's calm, steady voice filled the room, soft, but carrying the weight of authority that no one could ignore. You know, she began gently, letting the moment hang. When I started my very first business, I looked exactly like this. She gestured down to her own wrinkled t-shirt, her old jeans, her worn-out sneakers. No fancy clothes, no jewelry, no car waiting outside. I didn't have investors or partners or even a real office. All I had was an idea and the determination to make it real. The customers leaned in, listening intently. Some nodded knowingly, recognizing the truth in her words. But if someone like you, Sandra, Laura turned her gaze sharply toward the trembling teller, had treated me this way back then, had laughed at me, dismissed me, told me I was wasting their time, maybe I would have given up. Maybe I'd have walked out that door and never looked back. Maybe this entire banking network I built wouldn't even exist today. She paused, letting the truth sink deep. Sandra's lower lip quivered. Her eyes were filling with tears now. Real fear crept across her face as the reality of what she'd done finally hit her. Laura slowly turned, sweeping her eyes across the room, meeting the gaze of the silent customers. How many people, Sandra, she continued softly, did you insult today before I walked in? How many future business owners, future leaders, inventors, entrepreneurs? How many dreams did you crush today because you decided they didn't look like they were worth your time? The room felt heavier now. Some customers looked down at the floor, uncomfortable. A few others shook their heads at Sandra in quiet disappointment. Sandra's eyes spilled over with tears. Miss Bennett, please, she whispered, her voice cracking with desperation. Please give me another chance. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was you. If I had known. Laura raised a gentle hand to stop her. That's the problem, Sandra, she said firmly but kindly. You only would have treated me with respect because you knew I was the CEO. But that's not the kind of respect I want in my banks. I want every person, rich or poor, struggling or successful, young or old, to walk into this place and feel valued, seen, respected. Sandra wiped her eyes quickly, her hands shaking. But the verdict was already written. I believe in second chances, Laura said quietly. But not here, not today. Not at the cost of every dreamer you've turned away with your words. You've shown me, and everyone here, exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. She turned sharply to Mr. Clark, the stunned branch manager who stood nervously nearby. Mr. Clark, Laura said with authority, process Sandra's dismissal immediately. Make sure it is formal and final before the end of the day. And tomorrow, I expect every single employee in this branch in the conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. We will be conducting full retraining on customer treatment, on dignity, patience, kindness. No more of this behavior, no exceptions, no assumptions. Mr. Clark swallowed hard and gave a quick nod. Understood, Ms. Bennett. It will be done. Laura took another breath and turned back toward the customers who were still watching, holding their silence. And to everyone here who heard what happened today, who felt unwelcome or uncomfortable, I am deeply sorry, Laura said warmly. her voice softening. This bank was not built to serve only the wealthy, the lucky, the ones who look successful. It was built to serve everyone, rich or poor, young or old, dressed in suits or dressed in working clothes. You all matter here. You all belong here. For the first time in the last 15 minutes, the heavy tension in the room began to lift. A gentle ripple of quiet applause began from the far side of the lobby, first from the elderly man with the cane, then the young mother, then the man with the phone. Soon, soft clapping filled the air. A few customers even smiled. The mood, so dark and uncomfortable before, now began to glow with something rare in places like this: hope. Meanwhile, Sandra stood silently behind the counter, her face red with shame, her cheeks wet with tears. Wordlessly, she reached into the drawer below her station, pulled out her purse, and quietly began gathering her personal things. Not a sound escaped her lips, not a protest, not an excuse, just the quiet, heavy burden of regret. No one stopped her. No one defended her. And as she walked toward the staff door for the last time, not a single eye in the bank missed the sight. Laura watched her go, then turned, smiling gently at the customers one last time. "Thank you for your patience today," she said softly. "We will do better, starting now." And with that, the CEO of the bank, the woman who had once worn these same tired clothes while chasing her own dream, walked toward the door, head held high. Behind her, the bank felt different, lighter, better, because the greatest lesson had just been taught, not with anger, but with truth. And it was a lesson no one in that room would ever forget. As Laura Bennett turned gracefully toward the glass exit doors of the bank, her gentle footsteps echoed across the silent lobby. Every pair of eyes followed her, filled with respect, awe, and quiet admiration. The tension that had gripped the EHRB room moments earlier now melted away, replaced by a strange and rare feeling inside the bank: hope. But just as Laura reached the door, a soft voice called out from behind her. "Ma'am, wait, please." Laura paused, turning gently to see who had spoken. A young man, barely in his mid-20s, stood awkwardly near the brochure rack by the wall. He wore a simple grey hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers with worn soles. In his hand was a small folder of papers, dog-eared business plans, scribbled notes, sketches of ideas that only made sense to a dreamer like him. He hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously at the other customers, then gathered the courage to step forward. "Ma'am, I saw everything," he said quietly. "The way that teller treated you, the way you handled her, honestly. I was standing right there thinking I should leave. I was going to walk out and forget about opening an account here. I thought, if this is how they treat someone like you, what chance do I have?" Laura gave him her full attention, smiling softly, encouraging him to continue. "But now," he said, lifting the folder in his hand, "now I think I will open that business account, after all. This is the kind of leadership I trust. A place where the people at the top actually care how customers are treated. A place where someone like me, a nobody in old clothes, no suit, no fancy watch, might actually matter." His voice was steady now, more confident. Laura stepped closer and gently rested a hand on his shoulder. "You're not a nobody," she said, kindly. "You're exactly the kind of person I built this company for. Dreamers who want to make something out of nothing, who are starting small, just like I did." The young man smiled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you, Ma'am. I thought this dream wasn't worth trying, but now I know. Maybe it is." Laura nodded warmly. "Come back tomorrow," she said softly. "I'll make sure you get the service and support you deserve. No assumptions, no judgments, only respect for your ideas and your effort." The young man's shoulders straightened. He stood taller, the weight of doubt lifting from his back. In that moment, he no longer felt like a nobody. He felt seen, validated, important. Across the lobby, other customers smiled too. An elderly woman with her pension check, a struggling mother holding her child, a blue-collar worker with a small savings deposit. They all felt it, the shift, the change. Laura turned once more toward the doors, and this time, she smiled deeply. No grand speech, no dramatic farewell, just quiet strength. True power, after all, doesn't shout. It doesn't need to scream, threaten, or boast. Real leadership shows up in the small moments. When no one expects it, when no cameras are rolling, when the world isn't watching, it listens, it observes, it waits, and then, at the right time, it acts. Firmly, clearly, decisively. Laura Bennett pushed open the glass door, letting the sunlight pour in and warm her face. Behind her, the bank felt different now. Lighter, cleaner, better. A gentle murmur of conversation rose among the customers. Smiles replaced frowns. Confidence replaced doubt. A quiet applause broke out near the chairs, a few slow, respectful claps from the elderly man with the cane. A woman whispered to her child, "That lady saved this place today." And Sandra, gone, her shadow left behind as a warning of what arrogance costs, and what judging by appearances can destroy. The young man clutched his folder tightly, hope rekindled in his eyes. The staff stood a little straighter, reminded of the true purpose of their work, not numbers, not transactions, but people, and Laura. Laura walked away without looking back, because leaders like her don't need to demand respect. They earn it, not by titles or wealth or loud words, but by action, by quiet, unstoppable conviction, by teaching lessons the world will remember long after they leave the room. And that is the real measure of power.